Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of the show. Time is irrelevant. Date is irrelevant. Time is irrelevant. Time is irrelevant. As you can see, tonight's feature episode will definitely be displaying what the Krenim will have to offer because time to them is irrelevant. I'm joined here by my Chief Logistics Officer, Captain Timberwolf. Give us a howl, good sir. Our Chief Intelligence Officer, Captain Sarcasm Detector.
Greetings. That was a pretty good howl this week.
Oh yeah, he's got some energy behind him. Our Chief Science Officer, Captain Snipey, 47 Alpha.
Hello.
Our Chief of Cheesy Tactics, Captain SOB, who is not an SOB today.
Hello.
And I am your Chief Strategic Operations Officer, Captain Marshall. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. And we're just going to go straight into this right now. Timberwolf, after that lovely howl, I hope you have some lovely information for us here dealing with the Krenim offerings.
I mean, it's been amazing. I mean, because I've been predicting this openly since, I think, what was it, Uneasy Allies, but I've been trying to...
A little bit before that, since I've known you.
Yeah, since I've known you, and it's fantastic that they're coming out. And what makes me more energetic about it is tomorrow is my birthday. So on my birthday, I have a Krenim warship waiting out there somewhere for me. It's great. I might have to borrow one of your shuttles, Sarcasm, just so I can steal one. I'm hoping that's okay. But they just released the stats on our ships that are coming out, which we do have 4. But I'm only focusing on what's coming out of what's called the Year of Hell Lockbox and low-buy offerings. The obvious one that comes to mind is the Krenim warship, what I've been waiting on. The setup alone, I can honestly say, makes me drool. They've got a 5-3 weapon setup. You've got a Lieutenant Commander Universal Pilot, along with Lieutenant Commander Science, Commander Tactical, a Lieutenant Intel Tactical, and an Ensign Engineering. You've got a pretty interesting layout for your bridge officers, so you have multiple layouts you can do. You've got a good console layout, turn rate, your Starship ability package is a destroyer. It's a very nice setup for a Starship, in my opinion. To me, it's the ship I've been waiting on. And for the first time, I can say, in my opinion, I even like the console. The console does not feel gimmicky. It's going to be build specific from what I'm seeing. But even the console makes me want to at least try it to see if it's worth keeping around. And it's the console that it's a damage resistance debuff over time. Let's see here. I have it here. It does a debuff. It decreases their flight speed. It does a huge debuff to them. And then you also have your potentiality starship trait. It just seems like they put some time into developing this particular ship. And it's very nice looking. I know Sarcasm's got his thoughts on it, though I'm thinking he's wanting to test this out as much as I am.
Yeah, I think it looks like a mole sticking its head out of the ground. If you scroll up, look, it's got the head, it's got the little blind eyes, and it's got the little claws that it uses to dig in the dirt. So maybe it's digging through time.
It's possible.
But yeah, it is an interesting ship. I'm just going to compare it to the Nandi because that's the closest ship we have for comparison. Very, very similar ships. This one seems to be more engineering focused than the Nandi, which has more science, a lot more science. So it's got an extra science console and the extra science bridge officer. It is kind of, I find it a little bit awkward here. The DOff seating, so it's got one less officer. It's got the normal 5 bridge officers. It's only got an ensign engineering. So that lieutenant commander universal, it's kind of absolutely mandatory to run it as an engineer. Otherwise, you're going to be pretty weak on the ship. The advantage that I see that it has is the Lieutenant Tactical, which is a Intel hybrid. So the Nandy itself only has the Ensign Tactical, and that's in that particular spot. So you get the extra Intel seat, which I would probably run as override subsystem safeties too in there. And yeah, it's got one less science console, so you can't run the extra plasma console in there. But I think it's fine. I think it should be pretty much on par with the Nandy itself.
And I was hearing some people that were starting to do theory crafting. I was asking around. That was part of their build for this was override subsystem safeties, and then for the unit, the Lieutenant Commander Universal, running an engineering with form up on the pilot ability. So they were forming around having a lot of damage boosts through it, along with the override subsystems. I mean, just as a ship by itself, I think it's fairly well made, considering some of the other offerings that we've had from a Lockbox in recent months. Comparing it to the Nandy is totally different, though.
We're joined here now by our Chief Engineering Officer, Captain Jarvison Alfred, aka Vel, the Uber Simitank. What do you think about this, sir?
I think the opinion stated so far have been accurate. It reminded me a lot of the Nandy at first look. I think it's going to be a good ship. I don't think it's going to replace anything as the next Scimitar, but I think it's definitely a very solid ship as far as ships go.
I was actually surprised that they would give it a pilot seating in this one, considering that it's not what you expect for a pilot seating type B in on the type of ship it is. I mean, this is going to be a slow, lumbering juggernaut. Why are you going to give it a pilot seat in its whole bridge officer capabilities?
Hold on there. You're making the wrong assumption. It's a warship. That means it's a destroyer, which it means it's a type of escort ship. It's if you scroll down and look at the actual stats of it, actually scroll up, you'll notice that it's actually fairly quick, 0.18 impulse modifier, so that's really, really fast, and 14 degrees per second turn rate, which is pretty standard for this destroyer types. It's not as nimble as the other escorts, but it's a lot more nimble than any of the science ships and any of the cruisers. So it's that in itself is pretty much on par with the Nandy and the Shelgret and the other warships, the Nicor. I think the Nicors might be a little bit more maneuverable, but I digress.
And one of the other strengths of the ship that I just want to point out is this is a 5-3 ship with 5 tactical consoles and a commander tactical. There's very few 8-weapon ships with a commander tactical flying around out there, and that's a really offensively strong combination.
There's only one other ship that has that particular combination.
Well, there's a few ships, I think 4, that have a commander tactical and 8 weapons, the other ones being the Scimitars, the adapted battle cruiser, and one of those ships that's currently escaping my mind. But the 5-3 in the commander tac is certainly unique to it, as is the unique to it in the Scimitar as far as the 5-3 commander tac and the
Doesn't
5 tactics go.
the Lachi Shazar
Cruiser
have that?
comes on consoles, I think.
The Lachi Shashar only has 4 tactical consoles
yeah.
and does not have the commander
No,
tactical.
The Tal Shiar adapted cruiser.
The adapted cruiser is, again, short a couple of TAC consoles, but it has sensor analysis, can slot a commander TAC, and has 8 weapons. It's a very underrated T5 ship, in my opinion.
This is true. I think the ship can actually be built to be very, very, very strong because it's got the Lieutenant Commander Universal / pilot should technically mean that you can run a say an engineering / pilot bridge officer with combinations of both abilities. So you can run hold together, which is quite a good heal if you're at full throttle, and it's a debuff cleanser as well, and gives you a lot more resist than than the equivalent hazard emitters. So that means you can concentrate your science, Lieutenant Commander science, to some damaging abilities. You could probably drop hazard emitters or tinker with dropping hazard emitters. So, but I do agree with Cam. It is quite a challenging bridge officer layout. It will make you think.
What do we have next here as far as what the Krenim offerings are, Timber?
Well, we've got the next one, which is the Zal Heavy Cruiser. That's the next one on the list, which to me seems like it's the standard cruiser / tank offering, and Vel can, certainly challenge me on this or debate it. It's just from looking at its base stats and what they were trying to do to it, it looks like it's a tank offering because it has the 4/4 weapons set up. It has a high shield modifier. They've stacked engineering consoles with, you've got 2 engineering officers off the bat with a Lieutenant Commander Universal and command ability. And you've also got Lieutenant Science Intel. You've only got 1 commander at Lieutenant Tactical. So you've got a lot more engineering and science possibilities with this ship. It's paired up with the console as far as what it can do, and your trait, which is basically an immunity that can be activated. It seems very tanky in my mind. Now it could be very good in instances, but it just seems like it's been focused on one thing primarily.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that shield modifier of 1.3, that's approaching science ship territory.
The 1/3 shield mod is very good. I can only think of 2 cruisers offhand that can match that, and that would be the Shushar and the aforementioned adapted battle cruiser. Might be 1 or 2 others out there.
Typically cruisers have only got 1.0, maybe 1.1, but yeah, that is quite a high shield modifier for a cruiser. So that's a standout for me there.
The 1.1 is basically standard on fleet cruisers right now. Some of them, like the Audi Sign, a bunch of the newer ones have a 1.15, and some of the cruisers have started jumping a bit higher, but 1.3 is definitely of note. And the 55,200 is on par with the normal haul you used to be seeing. As to the tankiness of this ship, I would say I'm going to play around with the bridge officer layout. The big thing that strikes me about it is I don't like the console layout, because whether or not you do plasma explosions, if you're tanking, you want to be stacking plus threat consoles, and you can only grab 2 of those on this ship. The thing that really makes me interested, though, is the Starship trait, because I can't tell you the number of times that 1-second activation timers or 3 seconds left on a heal have made life painful in something like a Hive Elite or a laggy run, and I will definitely be looking into that for some of my Uber tanking needs. It's been pointed out by some of my friends from the PvP side that that's just going to be a massive pain, because you can spike someone down, let them get a 5% GDF, and then they can just chain immunities out of that.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, this whole thing, when I was reading this, it kind of was like, oh no, not this again. It just seems to be yet another series of, all right, here's what we're going to build for PvE, and no concern at all for PvP in any way, shape, or form, and how it's going to impact it. But that's the way it's seeming to us here, because this is something that's only going to add the frustration levels even more. Yes, we will attempt to adapt. Yes, we will do what we can in order to be able to find a way to defeat it, but the window of actually defeating somebody who's got a ship with these traits, with these many immunities out there, and at least 1 or 2 different ships, is very small as it is right now. This is only going to make it smaller.
Right, and I really like the idea. I mean, it's an interesting boost. I'm definitely seeing TAC captains parking in Warp Core Rages not hitting any resists because they know they can hit a 5% GDF now and be totally fine. I'm not sure if that's going to be worth slotting over an offensive trait, but there should be something done about immunities in PvP, and I think that's a different subject of discussion entirely.
Yeah,
it's a good theory for PvE, but
that will take us up to, 43 seconds of immunity out of every 60 that you could stack in that first minute?
They really need to look at this. Like, is immunity the right way to go? Is like a significant dodge probably a better way? Like, you'll still cover what you need to cover in PvE, but you'll also, give PvP a fighting chance. Then it's just too many immunities. The only saving grace is that you can only activate that console once every 2 minutes. Oh, sorry, the trait. Sorry.
The trait itself, yeah, it self-activates, I'm assuming, once every 2 minutes instead of you actually have to push a button.
I would assume so.
Yes, it just automatically triggers as soon as you go below 5%.
Gotcha. Yeah. What about the actual set bonus here, Timber? What did you come up with on this, and whether it'd be good for general purposes or is something more of a niche build?
Me personally, I see it as a niche build because you're having to use both consoles for the two-piece, and the Krenim console I do see is something that's worth testing. The Zal console, I personally wouldn't get the ship for the console, but I wouldn't mind seeing what it can do on someone else's build. But considering the two-piece is merely activating a science ability, increases energy, resistance, and defense, it just seems like you've got to stack for certain things for this to actually be favorable. And I don't see many people doing that.
See, that to me just opens you up to exotic science attacks. It doesn't cover kinetic damage, and the extra defense is pointless because someone hits a TBR around you. The TBR just latches onto you, regardless of what your defense is. So there's a gaping hole in that two-piece for me.
I want to point out also that we have subject to change numbers from Borticus on Reddit, and he did come with a specific note that these are subject to change, so I'm making that clear. It's 3% defense and 10 to all energy resist per stack, so it's not even going to be a huge value. And it's even more odd to me because these ships are not very heavy in the science. It's not like either one of these are a T6 science ship that would be firing off a lot of science bridge officer abilities already anyway.
Speaking about that, if you can scroll up a little bit, Odin, back to the bridge officer seating of this ship here. I'm kind of looking at it, and I can see it being done in a couple of different ways. So you have the Lieutenant Commander Tactical there. You can use the Lieutenant Commander Universal /Command as a tactical, and that gives us another cruiser that can have two tactical lieutenant commanders. The first one being the Avenger /Moog. But instead of that, I'm thinking perhaps running that Lieutenant Commander Universal as a science officer. Now, why is that? It's got quite a lot of engineering already, so perhaps we can run some kind of Ox to Bat build on that, or even better, reciprocity. And there's actually a better choice that perhaps we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show, and put that Lieutenant Commander Universal as a science, the Lieutenant Science /Intel. That will allow you to run Override Subsystem Safeties 2 in there, and because we have the Lieutenant Commander Universal, you're not losing out on science seats. So that will, of course, give it a big boost in that regards. Especially if you're running reciprocity, of course, reduces the cooldown of both tactical abilities and intel abilities, which includes override subsystem safeties.
And the big thing I see about this is, well, I'm not initially thrilled with it, because right now what I'm looking for in a ship is commander engineering and a lieutenant engineering, so I can get my 2 emergency powers, my engineering team Ox to Sif, and my 2 RSPs. I'm fine with dropping a copy of RSP on this ship, because I can pull all sorts of interesting stuff with command heals and override subsystem safeties. There's some interesting toys that can be done with this ship in a tank configuration, or if you're Jenna in a DPS configuration or whatever. It's an interesting ship. I don't think it's the strongest T6 cruiser they've released, though, and it'll be interesting to see what people do with it.
I would say it's one of the more flexible Tier 6 cruisers that they've released in recent times. So you can run it in multiple different configurations, and it'll work fine.
I agree with that. It reminds me of the original Avenger, where it had enough of the innate seedings that you could use the universal for whatever you wanted, and the ship wasn't gibbed.
Or even the Odyssey, which was even more flexible.
The Odyssey is definitely great, and this is even more flexible, I think, because of you have the lieutenant commander with one specialization and the lieutenant with a different one, which just crazy.
All right, Timber, what about the next ship that we have to look at here?
Well, the third one from the Lockbox is their T5 offering, which is the Nihydran Destroyer, which it looks exactly like it does in the show, which it looked a little weird in the show, kind of bug-like to me anyway. It's another destroyer, 4-3 setup. The bridge officer seating, lieutenant commander tactical, lieutenant science, and then 2 engineering bridge officers, 1 ensign, 1 lieutenant. You've got 4 tactical, 3 engineering, 2 science, with the T5U upgrade of giving you a 5th tactical slot. So this can be a 5 tactical, 3 engineering, 2 science. It's a nice little destroyer. I don't think it screams new for anything that it offers compared to the older ones. But it's a nice offering as far as, okay, here's a new skin for a destroyer that you might not have with maybe 1 or 2 bridge officers in a different variation.
Not much to say. It looks like a classic T5 escort layout, which is, pretty good. I mean, it's an escort. But there's nothing really original, nothing unique, nothing universal about it that's really game breaking or needs much attention, I think.
I'm actually going to go with a little bit different here and say that the visuals on this so far, from what I see here, it has both a familiar feel as well as a unique feel at the same time. I'm actually feeling this ship here as far as the visuals in and of itself, and I wonder how customizable this ship would be when it's released.
To me, that's just a Andorian Tribble in a different skin.
There's another
That's probably where the
perspective on it.
familiarity is.
Ship visuals aren't generally the first thing I look for in a ship, I'll be honest, but I do agree. I think the ship visuals on this, from what I've seen of it, appear to be well done and nice.
Yeah, it's not typically what I would actually go out and say this is the first thing that draws me to the ship, even though I was the one who stuck around in Defiant for who knows how long. But in this case here, it was oh, you know what? This actually looks nice. I've seen a lot of different ship designs coming out there, seen the way people can customize them, but just this straight out the box, the visuals that I've seen for these type of ships here now, this is the one that just drew my attention to it immediately. Says, I got to study this thing a little bit more, and I'm very much interested in it, despite it being just a typical destroyer type package. It feels like you could probably do something a little bit more with this here, but obviously perception not being reality, but just the way the visuals are set up, for me, it looked like, hey, you know what? I should pay attention to this ship a little bit more.
I'm just looking at it right now. This isn't actually, I wouldn't call it a typical destroyer, because the only thing destroyer-ish about it is the 3 device slots. Other than that, it's pretty much your standard escort. Like Val said, it's pretty reminiscent of the Tier 5 escorts that we've had before, although it does do one thing better than the old escorts. It doesn't have the useless tactical ensign that they all suffered from. Typically, destroyers will either have a lieutenant commander science or a lieutenant commander engineer of some kind. One interesting thing about this ship, it's got a 15-degree turn rate, which is on the, we've said it's a low end. It's typical for a destroyer or a warship, but then its impulse modifier is a 0.2, which is on the high end, and its inertia is 70, which is also on the high end. So this thing is going to pretty much fly like a curveball. Yeah, it's not going to be really easy to steer because of the low turn rate, but it's going to shoot off. I should say it's going to fly around like a fastball instead. It's not going to turn so well, but it's going to be pretty fast. Other than that, it's seems to be pretty standard. 0.9 modifier on the shield. Does that get improved when it gets to tier 5U, or does that stay the same?
It doesn't state. So typically you expect it to get improved, correct?
For tier 5U, I thought it was a plus 10% to shields, but I could be wrong.
I think I've seen it on some
That's
where it's at 10%.
Fleet get an increase to shield modifier.
I was going to say I didn't think T5U did, just the scaling hull, the console, and the ability package, but...
It may just be the fleet version. That sounds correct.
Yeah, because otherwise the T5U versions of ships would have more hull than the T6 versions of ships, because for the most part the T6 versions of ships were almost carbon copied in terms of stats with just the extra bridge officer ability and the specialization.
I'd have
All right,
to
well,
look back into that because I'm pretty certain tier 5Us are supposed to get an extra 10% shields, but I could be wrong.
all right, SOB, can you give us a little bit on what comes out with the DOffs? Like, what offerings do we have? Is this going to be a rehash of DOffs gone by, or is this going to be some new offerings here as well? What's the deal with this?
Precisely what it's going to be there. It's all of the DOffs in this lockbox are revamped versions of old DOffs. There's a lot of very hard to get DOffs, such as the variant Francis Stolmer. There is a variant of him in here. There's the DOffs from the Delta pack. There's 2 of the 3. We're missing the best album, the Beta Heal DOff, but the other 2 are pretty nice.
No ZMOC though.
That was a striking thing here. You look like you have a rehash of everything there except a ZMOC.
Borticus explained it pretty simply. They were only pushing out DOFs that they could get that were currently expensive and hard to get, and that had an R&D specialization attached. So the reason we didn't see the 2 ones that strike me as being expensive, being the maintenance engineers for bonus healing and emergency to Ox, I know no one knows about those, but seriously, those are like 70 mil DOFs all the time. And the ZMOX was because neither con officers nor maintenance engineers have an R&D specialization attached, and they were just trying to put out something to be helpful, and they didn't include everything that because that was their parameters for it.
Yeah, but I would have to say this though, just for the sake of discussion, if we're going to do a rehash of DOFs gone by, why not put out a ZMOC, and why limit yourself to just R&D only?
Let's look at it from the different perspective of the, hey, we can throw out some more R&D DOFs, and since we're going to be making more R&D DOFs to give players, let's see what cool abilities we can throw on them. And I think what a lot of the problem with this has come from is that players have been thinking, oh, you're taking all the old expensive DOFs and re-releasing them, and they were going, we need to make more R&D DOFs so people have R&D DOFs available. Oh, and hey, let's do something useful with their active powers, and I think that's a lot of what the disagreement's been. I'm not saying I wouldn't like cheaper ZMOCs, because, I've already got the 3 that I'm probably going to ever want, but I think depending on the angle that you're starting the problem at, it makes a lot more sense one way or another. They were just trying to do a quick re-release of new R&D DOFs and make it better for the players.
Just so happened to coincide that the developers were looking to do R&D DOF releases, and here's the excuse to do it. Let's add some flavor to them, and then we're looking at it as they're re-releasing all these DOFs with these flavors beforehand. Why is it only the DOFs that have R&D tags to them? Why is that? So I guess the perspective is pretty much what we're going to start nitpicking on then, I guess.
Well, you'd be surprised how many times I see in the trading channels people still trying to sell. Remember from the original Zindi Lockbox, those R&D DOFs, the Energy Beam Officer DOF name, I think his name was Drolid or something like that.
Drolid, yes, I have a bunch of those.
Towards the end, before the Kabali DOFs came out, like he was going for 40 or 50 mil. And you would be surprised how many people are still either looking for that DOF or are still trying to sell that DOF for that price. So I'm in favor of them releasing R&D DOFs and spreading them out through the system more. eventually, if they can make an R&D DOF that is in the con officer category, that will open them up to do a ZMOC. But looking at it on the other side of the coin, the more R&D DOFs they can put out there, the better. Because that shouldn't be a barrier for people once they reach level 15. The DOFs, for me to craft my Omni Beams is 20 mil. Like, that shouldn't be a barrier.
Yeah, for a casual player, when the DOF, even though I don't believe they bind when you use them, if the DOF is more expensive than the thing you want to craft, what is the point of spending your months leveling up crafting to 15?
Correct, Mundo.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. But I'd just like to point out that there are alternatives, especially for ZMOC. I've touched on Reciprocity and Oxtabat are a couple of them, and I think Snipey very soon is going to be talking about some other alternatives.
Yeah, and while Oxtabat does give some hate, I know a couple of very high DPS players who have interestingly swapped back to that on their scimitars, so that's really interesting to know, is that these guys already have the DOFs and aren't using them because they like a different build, and they're like, these are guys I'm talking about that are consistently hitting 100k, so it's not like I'm talking about uninformed noobs here.
Well, speaking of which, going into it, right before we actually get to Snipey's take on what the bridge officer offerings are from the Krenim side, are there any DOFs that catch any of you guys' eyes as far as builds, or just, I like this one?
I'll say there are 5 right now that have caught my eye. There are 4 that boost crit chance and crit severity for energy weapons and projectile weapons. Now, I have not seen the numbers personally. I'm sure someone else has found those numbers. But just having those abilities in the game look nice. But the one that catches my eye the most is one that, if you have Attack Pattern Omega, you activate Attack Pattern Omega, it gives a lesser buff to the rest of the teammates. So technically, you can give Attack Pattern Omega if there were a couple people chaining that. You can keep Attack Pattern Omega as a constant on all your teammates, so you have an increased damage modifier and, more importantly, increased flight speed and turn rate as far as your maneuverability as well.
Here's the interesting question. Does it stack?
Here's my question. Does the crit chance, crit severity DOF reset on a successful crit? Because I know I've had some of those mechanics, and if it resets on a successful crit, the DOF is basically worthless, since most high-end players are critting multiple times a second.
Exactly. Will it be just like rendering shots from the Delta rep, or will it actually keep that boost so long as you're in combat? And that'll be the difference between it selling for 1 million on the exchange in 6 months to 80 million.
They could also take it with a Sacris Crit move and have it, this crit ability on a timer, and then it stacks, so whenever the first stack wears off, the second stack and the third stack will still stay on there. There is that possibility as well.
I would like to know, sorry, Val, that is a very, very good question here. Personally, I think it's going to work like enhanced rending shots. Perhaps Bort is listening right now, and he can maybe clarify for us how it exactly works. But I wouldn't say it's useless. Try to look at it in a different perspective. Say you're running a assigned ship, or a ship that's very low on tactical consoles, or even a ship where you don't want to use tactical consoles, where you're not able to stack anything that gives you critical chance or critical severities. In that case, you would want to run enhanced rending shots and maybe a couple of these DOFs, 2 or 3 of these DOFs, critical chance, critical severity, whatever it is. So remember, there are people who aren't able to get high amounts of critical chance or critical severity, depending on the ship. Maybe they're in a tier 5 U ship. Maybe they're just in a tier 5 ship from level 40. They don't want to upgrade. They're happy with their ship. Maybe they just can't afford their casuals. They can't afford some of these really expensive consoles like the Lobby consoles, the Tachyo and the binaural infusion circuit, which they cost 200 Lobby each, and then you have to upgrade them as well. So these could help out. I would see them as options for players. What we're looking at here is the devs giving players more options than just the very simple, straight, this is what you got to run to be productive, and GTFO if you don't want to run it, So give them some extra options, and maybe we'll see a little bit of normalization between the player base. It'll help out the lower performing players a little bit, raise them up, and once they do perform a little bit better, they can get their resources a little bit easier and get more resources faster, and perhaps invest in higher end gear.
I will say this: one of the builds that you were talking about, coming from this lower performer over here with my torpedo build, is that I'm stacking a lot of crit D. I want a lot of severity on my build so that the torpedoes, when they do crit, they would crit for that much more. The trade-off is I am really low on my crit hit, so I'm trying to find other creative ways of boosting it. And this DOff offering here would probably be a very good fit for me for some of my build configs, depending on which ship I fly and which configuration I fly. Where I'm running low on crit hit, this is a way I could supplement it, where I didn't have that option before.
And can we give a positive shout-out for making this work with projectiles as well as energy weapons here?
Absolutely.
I was going to be the first to say that, and you just beat me to by half a second here. So, yes, finally, thank you guys for actually being universal on allowing it to work for both energy as well as kinetics. We thank you. Please help out the Gunship Guild out there and remove the drop-off from cannons. Thank you.
See, we're not always negative. Sometimes we say nice things.
We like I said beforehand, we will praise you until the cows come home when you do something right, and we'll be critical about it when there's something here that's like, this doesn't make sense. Why are you doing this?
I mean, let's be real here. This guy's best run as a torpedo boat is 21k behind a tank. He needs all the love he can get.
You got to rub it in.
You should just change the beams or something like that.
Yeah, you know what? That's a whole other subject. Let's move on because, you know what? You guys can cry all you want. It's okay. I played a game on hard mode. Anyway, Snipey, can you please give us a bit of a rundown on the Krenim BOF abilities and what we're going to expect out of them?
All right. Looks like we've got a new Krenim bridge officers, which are introducing a new type of passive bridge officer abilities into the game. Interestingly, you can't actually turn these into manuals, which the more optimistic side of me suggests that that the randomized abilities that they get could include, like high value abilities like Torp Spread 3. Not sure if Overload 3 is still a high valued ability anymore, but the Transfer Shields 3. Those sort of abilities when you look on the exchange are like millions of EC. So that's the more optimistic side of me. But it does say there it is going to be largely randomized. But all Krenim bridge officers are going to receive the following traits based on their career, in addition to a random assortment of 2 others, which will more than likely be ground traits. So the first one is called Flux. It's a passive ability to yourself, which is a 20% recharge speed for all non-weapon abilities. I think I heard someone say earlier in the pre-show discussion that this is most possibly going to be a ground ability. It's a bit unclear from that description, but we'll have to wait and see till it comes out. But the ones that are really interesting to me as well is the depending on what career you get the bridge officer in, it gives you a recharge speed which can stack up to 3 times. So that's 30%, which is essentially orcs to bat for that career when you're running 3 purple technicians. So yeah, so it's only valid for that particular career. So would you trade an SRO for one of these? That's a tough one. Probably not, depending on the career, depending on your build, really. So it's really depending on what you're going for. But I think what the most positive aspect about this bridge officer, you got reciprocity, which cools down TAC and intel abilities. You got all hands on deck, which cools down science bridge officer abilities. You finally got something that can cool down engineering bridge officer abilities faster as well. Now, they chose to make it a bridge officer. Interesting decision. I think we're just going to see how it performs in game.
I have heard a few things that I'm going to jump in here with. First one being that Flux is ground only, so you can't get like 30% on that bridge officer by just slotting one of them. The other interesting conversation was one that I had on Reddit, and it was about the science bridge officer. You can slot, say, a CDR deflector, two of these science bridge officers, and suddenly you're keeping your higher end powers like Gravity Well or Tychon's Rift or something like that at their global cooldown without investing in the chance of deflector DOffs or investing in a trait like All Hands on Deck. And suddenly these bridge officers can make a big difference for those science-focused ships, since you have an easy way to get to 30 that doesn't require you to run 3 of those bridge officers. As to the engineering and tactical, I really don't see it being that great, mostly because at the point where you can hit the 30% cap on those, you can basically duplicate anything that you're running already. But it'll be interesting to see what some people come up with, and I'm sure we'll see some really good things out of this from someone or other. I know that I'll be probably considering a tactical bridge officer just to make reciprocity feel more solid. That was a great point right there.
To me, the engineering is valuable. Where currently, if you're going to run emergency powder weapons and emergency powder shields, you need 3 purple damage control engineers to think. I think it gives you like a 90% to get to global. This will pretty much guarantee it to get to global. So that to me is worth studying to see whether, what could I use those 3 duty officer stations for to make my build more effective. But on the Romulan side, would I drop an SRO for it? Probably not. On the Fed side, where I can't have an SRO in the engineering bridge officer slot, it's definitely worth looking at, I think.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just going to agree with Snipey here. Yeah, if you're a Romulan, probably not going to look at these unless you're poor or haven't been able to invest in SROs. These might be an alternative for you. SRO is Superior Romulan Operative, increased crit chance, crit severity, and a couple other goodies here and there. If you're a Klingon or a Fed player especially, here's where it does get interesting. Now, the question I have is, do these work like ZMOC works, wherein every time you trigger a profession ability, does the cooldown effect trigger, or is it just a one-time, you hit it once and that ability is just cooldown that amount, and no matter how many other abilities of the same professions you trigger, it's not going to get reduced? Hopefully it works like the ZMOC, so every time you trigger, say you have the engineering one, every time you hit an engineering ability, you'll get that percentile. If that is the case, then you just need 2 of those. 2 of these engineers, 20%, should be able to keep pretty much all your engineering abilities to their global cooldown. Let's take a look at the emergency powers, for example. They run at, their cooldown is what, 45 seconds? So say you're running emergency power to weapons 3 and emergency powers to shields 1. You hit your emergency power to weapons 3. It's typically a 45-second cooldown. If you run 2 of these bridge officers, minus 20%, you're at 36 seconds. But your emergency power to shields is at 15 seconds. After 15 seconds, you hit your emergency power to shields, boom, you're on global cooldown for your emergency power to weapon. So that right there is your stuff on cooldown. The only problem would be abilities that have a 30-second cooldown or less. They won't get reduced that much. So say a 30-second cooldown ability minus 20% would be about 24 seconds.
24 seconds, yeah.
Yeah, and usually 30-second abilities have a global cooldown of about 15 seconds.
15 seconds.
Yeah, even if you're running 3 of these DOffs, 30 minus 30% is 21 seconds. It's really difficult to get abilities that are 30-second cooldowns down to global. It's just the way it works. But other than that, some of these longer abilities, say directed energy modulation, which I believe is 90 seconds.
It's 90 seconds with a global of 45.
With a 45. Okay, so you can, like, if you're running 2 of those, you can get it down to 72 seconds by hitting one thing. If you're running 3 of them, you can probably get it down to 62, 63 seconds, something like that, down to 1 minute, and then you hit another bridge officer ability, and bam, you're at, you're pretty close to 45. Yeah.
My question with this would be if somebody had, like, say for example, they wanted to have a Krenim engineer on their ship, but they only had 1 engineering seating, would it be worth it to run a Krenim, or should they go with like some other buff at that point that'll give them either a crit hit or crit D or both?
Well, if you're a Fed or a KDF, you can't have a crit D or a crit H bridge officer. But the in those stations, the other consideration as well is that because of that fact, a lot of people have their builds stacked out with the non-tactical bridge officer, bridge officers with the pirate trait for the extra 1.5%. I think it's a Cat 2 damage buff. So if you're running 3 of those, it's not a lot, but it's something that you're adding to your damage that you're going to be taking away. Again, it does depend very much so on your build and what you're trying to achieve. But still for me, it's something, an alternative to, especially when it comes to the emergency power 2 abilities, something that can cool down that quicker, right? That's not Orcs to Bat and is not using 3 damage control engineers is definitely worth sitting down and doing the numbers on.
And
here's
I want to
another
point
question. Go on.
From the way Borticus talked about this on Reddit, I distinctly got the impression that it's just flat, like it doesn't work like a ZMOC, it works more like PSI-CDR, where you hit that ability and it loses the 10% of its cooldown. The way he phrased it was the cooldown ticks down 10% faster, not you lose 10% of the cooldown, but either way, I think it's going to be you only lose the 10% per bridge officer no matter what else you do.
Gotcha. Now, my question would be on this: is it only for these, or what about, say, for example, ships with hybrid seating, and they have like an engineering command? Just for clarification purposes here, it'll only work on the engineering abilities, not on the command abilities. Or if it was, say, we have tactical intel, it'll only work for the tactical abilities, not the intel abilities that would trigger it.
Well, that's definitely a question that needs to be asked. Does it cool down the abilities that bridge officer can actually run? So if you upgrade this bridge officer to a pilot or to a command or to an intel, will it cool down those abilities as well? The description that we got here doesn't seem to suggest that, but it's definitely a good question that we'll need to come back on.
That would make for some really interesting possibilities, because if, say, I trained all of my bridge officers in intel and only one of them was in an intel station, could I have 50% recharge time on my intel bridge officer abilities? That would be a potential game changer for these.
I think
No worms would be.
Yeah, no, I think that's too good to be true. I don't think we're gonna see anything like that. So it's a flat bonus. It's like psi cooldown reduction, psi CDR. That's fine. So it's not as good as we hoped, but it's still, I still think it's pretty good. Would I swap some engineers for that? That's a tough call on that. But what it does, let's look on the bright side of this. There are ships, especially Federation ships, that have a gluttony of engineering seatings, and I think we're going to be talking about one of them in a few moments. These bridge officers could potentially help in that regard. So, yeah, there are people that. Okay, I'm just going to say, yeah, it opens up options. I've said this before. This is opening up more avenues, more options for players that are perhaps cheaper than going for SROs. So if you're a Fed, you want to get an SRO, you have to go to the embassy and then pay through the nose and probably an arm and a leg at the same time to get those bridge officers. These are going to be cheaper, easier to get, and they're going to be fairly decent replacements for some really expensive duty officers. So I'm positive about them. I might
Yeah, I'm
use them.
positive too. It's another avenue to achieve similar outcomes that you can do already in the game, but can be quite costly. So I'm all for stuff like that.
I agree. I like options, and I just want to clarify. When I'm referring to what Mordecai said on Reddit, he wasn't directly talking to me. This is my interpretation of what he said, and what he said was his understanding of something that's subject to change, so don't take that as absolute God written in stone at yelling him or me if that's not completely right.
All right. With that said, our chief intelligence officer had given us a little bit of a hint as far as one of the ships that might take advantage of a Krenim officer. Could you clear to explain on which one it is and what intel have you gathered on this ship?
So we talked a little bit earlier about 3 of the ships that were coming up with the Krenim Lockbox. That is not the only ship that's being released with 10.5. We're seeing 2 variants coming out tomorrow, which is a Tier 6 Excelsior and a Fleet Tier 6 Excelsior. And the name is the Resolute class. Very, very interesting ship. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Odin. And as you can see from that picture, it kind of, from the angle that they're seeing here, it kind of looks like a one of the command battle cruisers. But then again, the command battle cruisers were kind of modeled around the old Excelsior with that sunken-in deflector dish, and it kind of looks pretty. Definitely going with the new looks that they have recently, the 2410 vibe. This one kind of looks like a hybrid between the what's it called, the Excalibur class or the Excelsior class.
Between an Excelsior and an Odyssey, for me it looks like. But
Yeah,
I can see the Excalibur a little bit with the Excelsior right here in the hull.
Yeah. There's definitely some Odyssey in there, very much so. There's a lot of Odyssey in there. Of course, the Excelsior in there. And yeah, like I said, the Excalibur Excelsior types in there. It's kind of like a hybrid of all of those as well. And of course, the command battle cruisers as well, because they all share this very similar 2410 theme that we're going with. Very standard cruiser, four forward weapons, 4 rear weapons, and the bridge officer seating. Okay, so this ship, this is not really improved much from the old Excelsior. It still has the extremely awkward bridge officer seating, where it has 3 engineering seats, 1 commander seat, and 1 science seat. I believe the only addition or the advantage that Tier 6 has here is the lieutenant engineer was upgraded to a lieutenant commander engineer / command. So that's a little bit beneficial. You still have a lot of engineering seats to fill, but on the flip side, you can, one of those seats, the lieutenant commander, is can sit command abilities. There you have the consoles, 3 tactical, 5 engineering, 2 science. The fleet variant gets a extra tactical console for 4.
Correct.
Very nimble for a cruiser, 8 degrees per second, not the fastest, most nimble cruiser around, but it's not the slowest either. So you have cruisers with 6, 7 or lower. Impulse modifier 0.15, very fast. Traction 40, pretty standard for a cruiser. +5 all power. I like that. I would prefer like +10, +10, or +10, +5, but +5 in all seating is good. Of course, it's got the advanced transwarp drive that all the Excelsior variants have, and I believe it's 10 locations you can transwarp to or whatever.
Correct.
Correct.
Everything else is pretty standard to a cruiser. You have the Starship Ability Package. Those are pretty standard. And the 4 communication, the comm array abilities. So the whole package there. You know what? I'm not really excited too much about this cruiser. Yeah, there's a lot of people who like Excelsiors, and they'll probably get excited over this one. Although those people who do like the Excelsiors are probably going to go with the old skin that they come with. Oh, right, the traits and the consoles, whatever. I haven't really looked at those too deeply because you know what? I always consider those to be gimmicks. But let's see what we have here. Tactical Maneuvering Matrix Universal Console makes it even more durable and maneuverable. Pursuit Mode uses complex predictive algorithms and inertialess maneuvering thrusters to improve speed, turn rate, damage resistance, and the amount increases with the number of enemies in combat range. And there is some crippling of your target's engines, maneuvering thrusters, so this seems kind of interesting. The passive bonus is turn rate, speed, and damage resistance. On any, okay, so it can be fit on any of the Excelsior variants. So, seems pretty interesting. Vel might be a little bit more interested in this than I am. Seems to be a little bit tanky. The Excelsiors, like I said, for cruisers, for something that has heavy in the name, heavy cruiser, they're quite nimble. Improved weaponized emitters. What does this do? Starship trait. While this trait is slotted, your aceton beam. Okay, never mind. Let's just skip over and scroll down a little bit.
Yeah.
Right, come on. Let's just do this justice here.
Okay,
Your
That's
aceton
terrible.
beam and overwhelm emitter abilities cause radiation damage over time to enemies within 3 kilometers of the target. Now, is this going to be another one of those? Oh, look, here's a beam that's shot. Sorry, your aceton beam shoots the target, and it's per pulse, if I remember correctly, right? Is it a pulse or just one straight beam?
It's
Aceton beam?
Aceton
like
beam
a
is a
straight
beam.
beam. Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't aceton beam get buffed by part gens, but radiation damage doesn't? So
That sounds right.
so they've done it again. So what actually buffs that ability? So
Pretty
you
much
have to
everything
run-
that boosts. This is where the kinetic community comes in handy here, because we've already done the research for this. The counter command, multi-conduit, TAC console boosts radiation. The 2-piece neutronic set boosts radiation. And then after that, you're pretty much on your own.
Is there a trait that does that as well? I can't quite remember off the
There's a
top of my
couple
head.
traits for exotic, I think.
For exotic, but not radiation.
Yeah, there's only a few things that buff radiation damage in this game. So if you're going to choose to buff the radiation damage, or you're going to choose to buff the aceton beam if you choose to actually run that trait. So that's an interesting one. Or is it incorrect naming of the actual area of effect damage? Should it be called something else if it's being buffed by part gen?
Well,
You know
we'll
what would
find
solve
out.
this problem? You know what would solve this problem, though?
By
Have
addition,
radiation
yes.
damage affected by part gens. End of discussion.
All right,
Yeah,
so
but
I'm going to move on
That
and
means you'll
discuss
be able to
that.
one-shot cubes with your neutronic torpedo, dude, and that's just not cool.
Ah, ha, ha, ha.
Yeah, well, it's aceton beam, and you know what? This ship has plenty of engineering seats, so you can put like one or two aceton beams. I'm not sure why you would want to, but if you know, want to, you could, I guess. Of course, the ship comes in two variants. There's the standard C store. I don't know how much it's going to cost, probably about 3K Zen. And then there's the fleet variant. Fleet variant, of course, you get the plus 10% health, shields, and the extra console, which I said before goes into the tactical. Yes, 1.1 shield modifier there. So let's go back to the bridge offer seating before, and we're going to bring back some of the information we were talking to about earlier in the show. It's got 3 engineering seats, and you can't do anything about that. It's just locked in into 3 engineers. Here's where those Krenim buffs work out really well, especially, well, since they're not going to be working like ZMOC, they're just flat bonuses. You put 3 of those in there, 30%, it works out perfectly. So even if you're running emergency power to X twice, 45 seconds minus 30% is
31.5.
Thank you, Val. You can do the maths a little bit faster than I can in my head. So you have like a downtime of 1.5 seconds, which is the activation timer. You're good to go. So that's perfect. I think it works pretty well with the other abilities you can have in there. Heck, you know what you can do? This is really, really nice. So you can run reciprocity to keep the tactical running. All hands on deck for the extremely limited science seating. The 3 Krenim buffs in there. And you can have 1 Ox to Bat running. You can run a single Ox to Bat. You don't even need to run 3 technicians. I think just 1 technician in there would be enough to keep everything running pretty smoothly. What's the cooldown on Ox to Bat itself? Isn't it 30 seconds?
Ox to Bat.
30 seconds,
I
if I
thought it
remember
was
correctly.
40. You could be wrong. Haven't run it basically
It's,
ever.
I think it's 30 seconds, yeah.
So with a single Ox to Bat running 1 technician, you can bring it down to 18 seconds roughly, I think. So yeah, the problem I used to have with Ox to Bat is it's very clunky. To get it to working properly, you need to have 2 copies of Ox to Bat, and you need to use 3 DOF slots to get it running up. Here you can get past that. You can just run like 1 Ox to Bat with 1 technician, 2 if you really must, but then everything works out really, really well for that. That's the thing with the Excelsiors. They've always needed Ox to Bat to run properly. An Excelsior without Ox to Bat is pretty much a wet noodle in a wet paper bag thrown down the river. So yeah, this works out fairly well for the ship. I'm just trying to find the positives here. It's hard to find. I'm trying to look for the positives.
That being said, though, back in the day, the Excelsior with Ox to Bat was a damn strong cruiser. It could maneuver better than the Sovereign. The Lieutenant Commander TAC ability, 4 TAC consoles. If you were committed to running an Ox to Bat build on it, it aged very, very well. This isn't that groundbreaking for me. Like there's no real jump forward for apart from the command abilities. Like if you even run those, there is no real jump forward with this ship. It's just in the murky mix of the other tier 6 cruisers, and that's, to me, that is a little disappointing. And it is. I can't remember the last time they've released a ship without a universal bridge officer station.
I will say I think they did a very good job of upgrading the old ship and keeping it the same ship as its core, which I think is the reason for the lack of universal seating. I will say I'm about as impressed with this as I ever was impressed with the Excelsior, which is to say really not that much. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be people out there that are going to love it, and I think that's great, but I don't see this being a top performer in the world of tanking, or really in the world of DPS, or I don't really think it has any great strengths. It's not horribly weak at any one thing, although it's a bit short on the attack side, but it's kind of there. And I
Maybe
don't
that is the
generally get
point,
ships
though.
that are kind of there.
Maybe that is the point, though, because it's not going to be excelling at any one thing, but it's not going to have any gaping holes either. You have your jack of all trades ship here that'll be, for what we may consider a mid-level performer, will be strong in somebody else's eyes who needs to have all their bases covered. So this is a type of ship that'll be perfect for them, for the people who like to fly that, to be able to
Sort of
do
doesn't fit the name, though,
whatever's
does it?
needed. Yeah.
I'm going to
Doesn't really
actually...
fit the name. It's Excelsior. It should excel at something, and it sort of doesn't. It's just it's good
excelling.
at everything.
Well, here's the thing: it's excelling at just being a good ship.
I wouldn't say a good ship. I'd say it's a decent ship. It's
all right, decent.
It's decent. It's not too far. I wouldn't even say it's a good jack of all trades ship because of
it's a niche ship. It's niche.
It is a niche. It's very niche because it's not very flexible at all. You have very limited seating abilities on there. So, but then again, let's look at the positives. There are people that absolutely love the Excelsior, and I think the lead designer, Al Rivera, Captain Gecko, is one of them. So these people are absolutely going to buy the ship no matter what, even if it's a steaming pile of fecal matter painted pink. It doesn't matter to them.
It's the Galaxy class phenomenon.
I'm going to blow your guys' minds for a minute. What's the trait on the T6 destroyer thingy that we're getting? It starts with a P or something like that. The T6 destroyer.
Potentiality.
Potentiality. Throw potentiality, reroute power from life support, and Ox to bat onto the ship.
Stop.
With Krenim bridge officers.
Stop it. I'm going to smack you.
Seriously, I think that would be something really fun to play around with. I don't think that's actually going to be good, but I think it would be funny, and it would certainly be a decently effective, very non-traditional build. But as far as being a jack of all trades, I would rather have my T6 Avenger. It will do basically everything other than command abilities better, in my opinion.
Pretty much. I think
our intel officer
Odin,
here, though. Go on.
Sorry, I think Odin. I think this might make actually a pretty decent torpedo cruiser, if such things exist. Just looking at it, just because of its higher maneuverability and its command abilities.
Not really, and there's multiple reasons for that here. The seating is, in my opinion, a little bit off. Unless you want to have it as a highly survivable sea ship, I would say no. I mean, you have the Lieutenant Com Engineering Command. You got Concentrate Firepower 3 and 2 there. That's good. But as far as everything else here, the one Lieutenant Commander Tactical limits what you can do with this thing. So you're pretty much stuck with if you're loading a spread, then you have either a Chemosite or a attack pattern beta on there, and then you have a TAC team, and that's it. You're done. That's all. So you're more or less stuck with that. So in my mind, with the lack of tactical seating on this thing, not that great for a siege ship. But doesn't mean that you couldn't do it. It's just that I would feel that you'd be limiting yourself in this regards here.
Well, we're going on the subject. Torpedo tank?
Go on.
Torpedo tank.
Yeah, I would actually say torpedo tank would probably be better off with this. Probably would be.
Because you can run your reciprocity for the commander TAC. You can put the engineering stations to good use between concentrate, firepower, and survivability, and you don't really need the psi abilities. We found the T6 Excelsior's job, folks. The two roles no one wants to do: shoot torpedoes and tank.
I had to mute myself because I was laughing, but just so you know.
So did I.
Okay, well, let's move on to the next one then here. What about the what's coming up on Tribble here for all those Excelsior fans? Namely, the Excelsior itself.
So, all right. So much thanks to Luke Critter. I believe he was the one that provided these stats, and this is pretty much what we just talked about. He just took the images from Tribble and pasted them onto Imager. This was before these stats were actually released in a blog, so it's pretty much what we were just talking about before.
Actually, I want to give credit where credit's due. Luke Critter took the images from Commander SFC3, and he's since cited that source, so shout out to Commander SCF3 out there for actually getting us these images and getting them to Luke Critter.
Okay, Michael Barnes, much love.
Much love. Yeah, this, though, I mean, you're looking at the same thing here. You have your bridge officer stations that are more or less mirroring the Resolute. You have the consoles are more or less mirroring them. So we're going to have an Excelsior. Improved weaponized emitters for the Starship trait on this one.
Yeah, that's the aceton thingamabob.
Yes. Yeah. So unless they buff some serious radiation damage, once that ability is activated, I don't know.
Wait a minute, what does Overwhelm Emitters do? Is it the one that reduces shields?
Overwhelm Emitters, the command ability that, what, if you attack it, it shoots the shields down, and then it gives you a small percentage of that as your own shields?
Okay, so that might actually be interesting. Giving that a particular ability a buff, Overwhelm Emitters, that might be something to experiment with. The Aceton Beam, who cares? But the Overwhelm Emitters, yeah, okay. I would probably do some experimenting with that just to see how that works. Probably not on this ship. I probably try it on the command battle cruisers just to have a little bit more flexibility. But yeah, interesting.
And shout out to Luke Critter for coming up with some very interesting write-ups on the new Fleet Holdings. I'd recommend everybody going over to lukecritter.com and reading up what he has there. Some very good information. We're just going to gloss over it. Some of it we've already glossed over a little bit here, but he has some details written up on it. For those who checked it out earlier, yes, he's already acknowledged that he has to make some corrections on the math, but the concept and the initial premise itself is sound. That'll give everybody a very good idea of what to expect. And two public service announcements here before we wrap up on the show. One, for those who actually want to... Actually, you know what, Val? Do you want to say something about the builds? The builds... how do I put this eloquently, if you want to advertise it or not? Something that you administer over on the build section somewhere.
Do I want to say something about what? Can you PM me in game really quickly so I have a clue what we're talking about? Sorry.
No, I'm not in game, but hang on a second. Well, first, the public service announcement as far as if you want to try and improve your game both in space and ground, and you're trying to say, you know what, I want to be able to actually go into an advanced or an elite STF or ground map and be able to do well, go to stocontinuum.com. There will be resources that will be directed either to one of the individual members' channels or sites or web pages to get that information. And we're also going to look to start putting up some of that information directly onto the STO Continuum website itself. That way you'll be able to see the guides, the videos, the tutorials, as well as a demonstration on each one of these things here. So you're not just reading about it, but you're seeing it. You're seeing it in action. You're seeing other people putting these techniques to action, and in some cases even coming up with their own based off of what we've already described to them and shown them what they can do in game. So go to stocontinuum.com. You'll be able to get that information from all of the members and the founders of the STO Continuum. Enjoy it there. And gentlemen, do you have anything else you want to add into here before I turn the mic over to Vel and we'll run off with the rest of the show?
Yeah, I've got something with the patch tonight. The three big things for me, obviously, apart from the 10.5 stuff coming out, more general stuff. I'm sick of being told where the troop transports are heading to, and from tomorrow, in Gateway to Grethor, it's not going to be spammed as much. You know, like the troop transports are heading towards the planet. I know that already. I've been told a million times. From tomorrow, I won't get told as much, and that makes me very, very happy. There are going to be some more. Well, they haven't actually got into any detail, but server performance impact. Reduce. They're going to improve abilities that have been affecting server performance. So lag fixes. We'll see what happens there. And also the big one for me, they've done something with warp cores that get weapons to shields at rare and epic as well, but they haven't fixed what happens when you upgrade a fleet warp core that has already weapons to shields and it gets weapons to shields ×2. Now, if that's what that fix means, it could have probably been explained better, but it doesn't suggest it to me. I've got an epic warp core at weapons to shields ×2, and it's been that way for months, and I can't use it because it's got a wasted modifier on it. So please, Cryptic, can you get onto that? That will be fantastic. So those are the three big things for me.
Sorry, go ahead, Timber.
The only one that I noticed, and it's going to be very, I guess, upsetting for some people that have been using this technique, they're also fixing Chronoton Jolt. So you won't be able to use it in the team basis that has been shown off. It won't reset itself, so basically you won't be able to use it like 200 security officers in one instance.
I'll be honest, that was pretty absurd. And I'm pretty sure we had to all know that couldn't have been the plan.
No, and it was a fun thing to play around with for a while, but obviously they're fixing it because it's not what they originally intended for the code. So you might as well, anybody that's listening, go ahead and get it out of your system now, because soon it will no longer be usable in the regard you're using it now.
Okay, thank you, Timber. So I just want a quick comment to what Snipey was saying about the W2S work cores. What they're doing is they're removing the W2S modifier that comes with ultra rare, I believe, and replacing it with an A to S. A to S. So if you have an ultra rare warp core with W to S, it's going to be changed. It's going to have A to S on it instead. And I believe
it doesn't say ultra rare; it says rare. So that's why I said that. So I hope you're right. At least it's two modifiers. That no W2S ×2 anymore.
Those modifiers, the X to X modifiers, are rare. The ultra rare modifier is AMP. So I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. The other big change that's coming, and this is the big one with capital letters, is the change to damage modifiers.
I left that one for you, mate.
Oh man. Okay, I gotta cool down. Let me just fan myself a little bit because I'm getting a little bit excited here.
Oh geez.
Okay.
You're not the only one, but go ahead, preach it, brother. Yeah, preach it.
Everyone's getting excited, so this change is going to affect both space and ground. And what they've done is they've taken the damage modifier, which is universally considered to be junk. Useless whenever you're upgrading a weapon and it gets DMG, you're like, ugh, why? And that's been changed now. What's happening? The mod itself is going from a 2.5% base damage increase to a 3% final bonus. And final, it really means final. It applies after every other bonus that you might have on the weapon. It applies after that. And it stacks quite interestingly. So we talked about it last week, and we got the numbers wrong. I'm sorry about that. We got clarification from Bordicus. It is very, very interesting. Some of us have been doing the math and then doing the math again and then kind of saying, this can't be right, and then doing the math again. And it's actually come out that damage is a very, very good mod. And in fact, it is potentially better than all the other mods except pen. So I'll feel comfortable saying this right now. The order of priority for weapon mods is pen first, then damage, then crit D, crit H, and finally accuracy. Now, here's the thing. Between damage, crit D, and crit H, there isn't a lot of difference. So crit D is perhaps 1% better than crit H. Damage potentially is maybe about 1% better than crit D. And we're talking about per mod here. Damage actually gets better the more damage mods you get, so that potentially is even better. The other thing to consider is that crit D mods get diluted. The more buffs you have, the more, especially category 2 buffs, the more category 2 buffs you have, the more that crit severity gets diluted. Damage will never ever get diluted. It is just a flat bonus that you get at the very, very end, and it is absolutely fantastic. So if you guys are listening out there and you're wondering if you haven't got yourself some really good weapons, go look for them right now while they're still cheap on the exchange. Damage 3 pens, damage 2 pens, damage times 3, damage times 3 crit D will do in a pinch as well. You can get them fairly cheap from the fleet. So fleet weapons are actually really, really good right now because they actually come in crit D times 3, damage times 3 crit D, and they're a bit cheaper to upgrade. But yeah, if you can look for any type of damage 2 pen weapon, those are going to be fantastic come tomorrow.
So pretty much what you're saying, Cam, is that the ultimate weapon is going to be a damage times 4 pen accuracy, which is an epic weapon.
Question. Is the damage modifier on epic, is that a full damage modifier or a half, and does that make it useful to have on the established weapons you already have?
That is a good question, and the answer to that
I have a lot of answers.
It's a double mod. So it's equal to 2 damage mods, according to Bordicus. And I believe Agriso has actually tested it out and confirmed it is 6%.
There's a couple things on here I want to just give some clarification on. First of all, the current state of the damage modifier on live is that it gets 2.5% Cat 1 from rarity, like every other mod, and 5% Cat 1 from being the damage mod. The current state on Tribble is just the 3% final, no Cat 1 from rarity, no Cat 1 from being damage. The second thing is it stacks in a completely understandable way. It's just a 1.03 multiplier tacked on after each other, or 1.03 to the number of damage mods if you want it in one category or whatever. The third thing I want to point out is that according to the math that I've done, if you are not a tactical captain, and thus you're not saturating your Category 2 buffs with Attack Pattern Alpha and go down fighting, or you don't have all hands on deck and you're not doing short runs, you probably still want crit D times 3, but this is the point where it's all very close. Being Romulan makes the crit D more important for you because you have more crit H as well, as opposed to a Federation captain. So it's not like there's some massive change. If you're an engineer or a science captain out there, I would encourage you to stick with crit D3s. And I definitely want to second Jenna's suggestion of, if you can't afford damage 3 pens or crit D3 pens or whatever, the damage 3 crit Ds from the fleet store are a very competitive weapon at this point.
Yeah, okay. I'm just going to say here, even if you're not a tactical captain, the amount of power creep that's coming that's already here and that's going to be coming in the future, especially with the Krenim holding science consoles. We're just getting more and more Category 2 buffs and even Category 1 buffs. And the more of the more power creep we get, the better damage is going to get. So this is actually fantastic. It scales upwards very well. The more power creep we get, the better it is. While something like Crit D, it's still good. If you have full sets of Crit D weapons, either Crit D4s or Crit D3 pens, they are still really, really good. They're still on the top end, but they're not the top dog anymore. Damage is. So that's up to you. Personally, I do have a few damage 2 pens that I want to upgrade. I'm just sadly lacking in resources required to upgrade them, so it might take me a month or so to get on there. But enough of that. It's time for a little intelligence leak before I turn it over to Vel and some final words here. So just give me a second to actually activate my screen share.
What have you got for us?
Where do I have it?
This should be good.
Start.
I think I know what it is.
Okay, so are you guys seeing this on the screen right now?
I do.
Okay, so what do we have here? This is probably something. Not
Looks like a pop-up for a parser.
A parser.
Couldn't be it. No.
That's very strange. Now I gotta say though, guys, this is an alpha right now. It's not even in beta. We're still adding features and we're still kind of debugging the features, but we do have something working. It actually works. It works really well. Well, I won't say it works really well. There's still some bugs and there's still some missing features, but it works. And I've been testing it and giving feedback to the developer of it, and pretty much I'm getting like 3, 4, sometimes 5 different updates per night of this. So it's very much a work in process. I think the rest of the guys here have been actually testing it as well for different reasons. Here's another screenshot. Like I said, it's still alpha. It still needs polishing, but as you can see here, we have a DPS bar, which blah, blah, blah. Here's some of the different things that'll show: DPS, total damage, percentage, whatever. Analyze the log, etc. Here are the different combats. Of course, if you click this little DPS line here, we get a nice little line graph. There's this little button here. View individual player details. So if I click that, now we're starting to get a little bit more in depth. This is an infected run I did the other day, and this is actually the parser broke on that. I actually got 80K, but for some reason there was an error. Like I said, it's still an alpha. It's still buggy. We actually managed to clear up that bug so it doesn't happen again, but you can see the different things that are going off here, the percentages, crit chance, the flank, how many kills each thing did. Very interesting. Of course, base damage, maximum 1 hits. You like that, Odin? Do you see that there? Actually, it's probably Snipey. Snipey, do you see that, what I'm pointing out right here?
Yeah, that's a little bit disgusting right there.
That's a bit low, mate. What are you doing?
What am I doing?
That's disgusting. That's disgusting.
So of course, there you can click each player here, and this one, if I clicked on this one, it'll show me the pets. Of course, the mobilize, the quantum mines from the mobilize count as pets for some reason and get attached to the player, but this actually breaks it down for the pets as well, like it does for the player. Of course, up here there's the details. But yeah, it's working, and it's gonna be coming very, very soon.
My experience with it is excellent, and like Cam was saying, there are It's not even an alpha build yet. It's there's still a lot of fine tuning and confirmation of its accuracy, which is pretty damn good. But it has not crashed for me once. I've had recent stability issues with the current established pass. It hasn't crashed for me once. So it is a very, very, very stable system.
I will speak to that as well. My readings have actually shown that it can track stuff to me almost better than the current accepted parser can, and I don't like that parser right now because it will crash on absolutely every run that I do. The only thing is there any chance that, since I know this was promised to players a couple weeks ago, is there any chance that we could get maybe any other thoughts as to why it's been delayed this long?
I can't talk about that, I'm sorry. It's classified intelligence.
You'd need a G14 clearance in order to be able to get that type of intel.
Yeah, you need Alpha 1 clearance, mate.
Oh, do I have to be attack captain to get that now? Well dang.
You can. There's some forms you have to fill out in triplicate, and
it's a lot of paperwork. I'm trying to do it now.
And we've got a guy with a rubber glove too, mate.
Yeah.
But that doesn't matter because we are moving forward right now, and you should be seeing a beta going to a much wider test audience fairly soon, trademarked. I can't say when, but I think soon trademark is enough for now.
I think relatively soon trademark would be an even better statement based off of some of the intel that I have been hearing as well. But I'll leave that up to the developers when they actually come out and say, welcome to the beta version of this parser. With that said, Vel, did you have anything else that we need to say before we close off this extended edition of the show?
Well, some people may know me as a Reddit user. For those people that know that Reddit user, they might know that the #1 Google hit for STO build help is the subreddit that I, among a couple other people, moderate. The Star Trek Online's STO build subreddit, which you can get to by going to reddit.com/r/STO builds, which I'm sure Marshall's going to be nice enough to put in the description of this video.
But of course, as well as on the Continual website.
And so anyway, what we have is not only we have, so you can submit our build to our subreddit and you can get help with it. I will say after a very favorable experience that I've personally had with Zonas of the Pilot Review Show, we'll definitely be having a shout out from him on there in the next probably day or two. And we also have a constantly updated wiki that doesn't have the stuff that the official STO wiki stuff has. Instead, it tells you how stuff is good, why it's good, and how you use it. So it's basically, if you want a manual for Star Trek Online, this has information from Jenna and myself and the information that I've collected from some of the game's greats, a lot of whom are currently in here right now, as a matter of fact. So if you want information written down, if you want build help, if you want anything like that, I encourage you to come to Reddit's STO build subreddit.
I second that as a contributor and as someone who has posted a lot of builds and has helped actually partially at least build the wiki there. Reddit.com/r/STO builds. Very great resources for your ship builds and your helps. I don't spend a lot of time there these days, but I've always recommended it to people. Very good if you're just starting out or if you're an expert. Lots of good information, and it's constantly being updated.
And two other things I want to quickly mention. The first one being, we are currently also doing ship discussion threads. So every week we do a ship discussion thread on either the newest ship that came out with that patch or the newest ship that we haven't yet discussed. So if you're looking for more people's opinions than just what's on the shows and views from an average user, thoughts on how to build it, out from people who've flown it, you can get that there. And tomorrow, after I have a discussion with some of the gurus on here about the damage mod, and we come to a bit more of a consensus, I'll be posting up an updated version of the the numbers on how much difference each weapon mod actually makes for anyone who's interested in what the difference is.
And as a person who initially came back into the game, the STO builds was one of the first resources that I tapped into in order to try and get a feel to see what was out there again. Okay, what's the meta? What am I going up against or for with? What am I expected to do? And there was a plethora of information, both old as well as current, that helped me not only just make my build, but refine it and constantly bring it back to the drawing board. Everything that I've used beforehand and I've more or less evolved away from, I end up coming back to it again whenever a new trait comes out. I go back to the drawing board, and STO Builds is my first resource that I have been using to say, okay, I'm going to revamp my entire ship. Let me go over some of this material again here to see where I should start going with this. So you guys have been awesome with it. Me personally, I would like to say thank you, and all the people from the Kinetic community would also like to thank you guys for doing what you do.
And alongside with the Kinetic community, I'd like to throw a shout out to the Cannon community. We have a couple really good cannon builders on there, and I don't just mean dual heavies. I mean, if you like the flying ships from the show, we have two of the game's better players from the Star Trek Battles community on there that'll frequently comment on cannon builds. We don't care what your playstyle is. If you want help with the ship, come see us.
I believe their proper name for their group is called the Gunship Guild, and we support the Gunship Guild. Just saying.
Oh, have they changed their name now?
My understanding was that was what they wanted to be recognized as.
Is their slogan still, at least we're not firing torpedoes?
Yeah, go screw yourself.
But they might be firing the torpedo.
Oh, you guys are not funny. Don't make me post videos of each one of you guys blowing up now. Don't make me, because I have them. I have them.
Hey,
Just use the crystal that video. You're right.
You know what? That's it. After this, we're going to go PvP. See you guys out there. So, with that said, right before I blow up my co-hosts here, I'd like to thank each and every single one of them before I put an RIP stick on their corpse and their rotting hull. Thank you very much for our Chief Engineering Officer, Vel at Jarvis and Alfred. Thank you very much for joining us here. Our Chief Logistics Officer, Captain Timberwolf. Our Chief Intelligence Officer, Captain Sarcasm Detector. Our Chief Science Officer, Captain Snipey 47 Alpha. And our Chief of Cheesy Tactics, who I'm definitely going to make sure that they're on my side to bring out the pilot cheese, Captain SOB. This is Odinite, a.k.a. Marshall at Odinite. See you guys out there. Good night.